Greetings. This is Chenille, and I am here with another episode of Candid Conversations with Chenille. Men cry differently. If you have not had an opportunity to experience part one and part two, before we dive in, I want to encourage you to go back and to listen to parts one and two. But tonight, we are actually on Men Cry Differently, part three. We have been having some dynamic, in depth conversation about men and how they do cry, how they express differently than we do as women. And so I'm so excited to continue that conversation. It was so full last time, and I felt like we did not have an opportunity to get everything out on the table. I believe last time we only touched maybe one of the questions. And so we are here for part three. And you guessed it right. We have Pastor Dave Wilson with us again, who's going to come and share more nuggets to help us understand how men cry and how it is that we need to hear what is being said that may not always be said. So, Pastor Dave, we are so excited about having you back on Candid Conversations with Chenille. I believe this is a phenomenal way to end the new year. And so I'm so glad that you were able to join again with your busy schedule. And
No, thank you for
so
having me.
thank you.
Glad to be here.
Okay, good, good. So we know that time is always of the essence for us. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to just dive right in. And so, what we're wanting to do with this particular episode is we're going to talk and get as much as we can out. And then, if we have time, we may open it up, to get some questions in. So that way, I won't be the only one picking your brain. It will
No
be
problem.
others that are here as well. And so let's kind of jump right in. So we want to maybe
Hmm.
shift the conversation just a little bit. We've talked about so many things. One of the big things that stood out is we talked about the importance of not disrespecting,
Hmm.
the person that we're with. Last episode, we talked about the importance of an apology.
Hmm.
I love the way you said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I didn't mean it like that." And so, that was, very good information. And
Hmm.
so I want to shift, just a little bit.
Hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about, men from the emotional side
Hmm.
of a man and what's produced and what comes out of, that emotional side of a man. So we may witness it as anger,
Hmm.
um, short patient,
Hmm.
that emotional side that most times it has a deeper root. Let's talk a
Hmm.
little bit about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So tell me. Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of times with men, even men's silence is an emotion. So I think
That's
it's really critical to learn your man, learn who he is, learn his background, learn his history, because his present is only a reflection of his interpreted history.
mhm,
Men are always having internal conversations with ourselves, and I think that predicts and pushes how we express what we feel. We were in a men's session early this morning. It's interesting we're talking about this. And one of the things we talked about is how, based upon the models that we've seen, based upon the models that we've experienced and not experienced, a lot of time, even if we don't know it, has affected us. And I think what I've learned in observation and considering myself is the emotional side is the least developed side.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. We develop our physicality, we develop our muscles, we develop our image, we develop our look, but oftentimes we overlook that emotional side, that emotional maturity,
Mm,
the ability to have difficult conversations, the ability to disagree with our spouse or girlfriend or loved one intelligently, the ability to have difficult conversations and yet still listen, though I may not see your perspective. So it's so much inside of that. And anger versus passion.
mm,
Again, I think that goes back to knowing your man. You may call it anger, he may call it passion, but we still have to ask the honest question: where did that come from? Because typically we produce and we express either what we've seen or what we know
mm,
or what has affected us without us knowing. It takes a very in tuned man to be self aware, to be aware of his emotions and how he expressed them, even if he don't like them. And that's not easy. Uh, we a lot of times we live on automatic and we live moving forward. So unless we have a reflective life, we don't see it until it comes out, typically in an experience, and
mm,
whatever that looks like per male.
mm.
For me, I was I was the silent one. You know, I was the one who said, "What's wrong with you? Nothing." And my nothing, trying to make sure my nothing makes you aware that something is bothering me, and I want you to keep asking me versus saying, "Let me tell you what's bothering me." But I didn't learn. I didn't have a model. I didn't see that. And ironically, when I got close enough to my dad, he had a very similar pattern.
That's good.
And I
That's
thought
good.
that was interesting that though I was not in his territory, his vicinity on a daily basis, I had this similar pattern of silence that was really not silent because it was crushing me and it was sending messages to my loved one, to my spouse, to my ex-girlfriend at the time. So I had to learn, okay, where did that come from? So yeah.
Good. That's good. So you said something earlier that really stood out. Talk a little bit about because it's easy to get it confused. You
Mm,
talked about anger versus passion,
yeah.
and oftentimes we as spouse, girlfriend, significant other, we may easily perceive something as anger when in turn it may be passion. And then
Yeah.
so how do we decipher, because that's a thin line. And I
Yeah.
know it's probably going to depend on the situation itself, that's going on. So talk a little bit about that anger versus passion, because honestly, the anger, if a man is angry, then that's a different type of feel versus passion, of course. And so
Yeah.
again, it's easy to get those two intertwined. So talk about that.
Yeah, I think the anger piece, you have to really study and be aware of what happened prior to the expression. I think what happened prior to the expression can really serve as knowledge. Was this a trigger, or is this their capacity? These are things just to consider. Do do he express like this all the time? In these situations, do he express like this all the time? This is a great nugget as it's coming to me. Is he being defensive?
Okay.
And is the anger expressing out of some insecurity? I think it's wisdom for the woman to study the pattern per se of anger
Okay.
and pay attention to the words that may have triggered or lifted or brought to the surface each time he responds like this. Is it over for resources? Is it over finances? Is it over? Does he express this tone when it's something he forgot to do, when something's not happening well. What are the circumstances? And I think that helps you get to that place. That this is a philosophy that I practice with the anger piece, and I share this with my wife. I typically don't address things unless I've seen it happen about 3 times. Reason being because if it happens 3 times, most likely that's a pattern. And how you get to the anger, if you are determining and interpreting, this is not just passion. This is not because you can hear passion at a football game. You can hear passion watching the basketball game in the same living room, and you can hear if you start losing. But I think it's the experience that reveals, okay, are we dealing with an anger issue, an insecurity issue, a a issue that he's being defensive about? So always pay attention to what triggers that tone. When do you hear that tone? What circumstance around that tone? What issues around that tone? And then addressing them outside of the environment that they occurred is key.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So let's make sure that all of the hearers are completely understand what it is that you're saying when you talk about addressing it outside of the environment that it may have occurred in.
Mm.
So in that address, that could mean also waiting until a different time to address it.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So a lot of times we want to, sometimes when things
Mhm.
happen, we want to jump on it right then,
Mhm.
but it may not necessarily be the time
Mhm.
to address it, you
Mhm.
know, and so add to that.
Yeah, yeah. I think will it be detrimental to address it now? Will it help? And then it's interesting. I'm thinking as we're talking about that. Um, do we have to deal with our pride when I'm addressing it? Because am I addressing it for the benefit of the relationship? Am I addressing it for awareness of healing, or am I addressing it to prove that here I am, I'm right again? What's the motive in me bringing it to your attention? Do I bring it sarcastically? Another part I thought about that anger. Do I bring it from an accusatory perspective? I think we shared about this either week 1 or week 2. What type of language do you use when you're de-escalating situations? And women, you have that power. From a biblical perspective, you have the influencing power to per se to calm that man, to guide that man, to help bring that tone down. It's all within your words and your tone and when you handle a situation. So let's say something happens at home. Do you need to address it at home that night? Is it something you can say, hey love, whatever your place is, whether it's a restaurant, coffee shop, hey, can we meet here and let's talk? And being able to secure him that your team, let's say his name is Bob. Hey, I'm Team Bob. I just wanted to share, when I heard you the other night, this is how I interpreted that. And I may be wrong, but this is how I felt when I heard you. This is how that frightened me, or this is where that took me. And then you, with the influence, and I'm sure you didn't mean to hurt or harm me, but I want to understand you better. Babe, what's going on? Tell me what you were feeling in that moment and why. Because I'm here and I want to help. That may open the door to him even reflecting, because keep in mind, most of us live on automatic. So sometimes even our anger is on automatic.
Mm, that's good. That's good,
So
right?
you set the environment for me to reflect. You set the environment for me to self-examine, when without you being that mirror to him, he may not even have recognized that's his pattern. Or watch this,
That's good.
you're bringing something to his attention that may have been brought to his attention in time past, but from a different tone. So
Oh,
you may be the tone of solution, when in times past, a mother, an ex-wife, an ex-girlfriend, a sister could have been a tone of accusation. So it's a great responsibility in the present, but I think addressing it outside of the environment at a calm time when emotions are not high may be critical to resolving it.
Mm. That's good right there. When you talk about somebody else could perhaps, have addressed this same thing, but the tone in which they addressed it, are you saying it may have caused them to be more receptive to
Yeah.
receive it if it was in a tone that's a little more gentle,
Yeah.
versus the at you kind of tone. Is that
Mhm.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when we talk about anger, you talked about anger, you pulled out some key things with anger. So let's look at help us to understand anger versus passion. Can
Yeah.
you bring that home for us and maybe paint a really good picture for us to understand the difference between the two?
Yeah. What I've seen in many cases between the two is the language and the tone in the anger. Typically, it's defensive. Typically, it's backing you up off of them. Um, yeah, typically it's pointing you because if you're hitting me, I'm going to get you up off of you because I'm a man. If there's anything in me that's interpreting you're disrespecting me, you're minimizing me, you're going to hear my language get you up off of me. Typically, that's some form of anger. Yeah. Because this is the thing, anger is not always loud.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's
see, we
good.
we interpret language as always loud and yelling. Sometimes it's silent and nasty and cut you quick and get you up off of and a quick shut up. And don't say that no more. I'm sick of you. It's
Mm.
snappy. So you have to pay attention to the wording. Passion, I think you could hear the bigger picture quicker. You can hear that it's not directed at you. It can be passion in the situation, but typically it's not defensive when you hear passion. Um, what I've heard also with passion, I've heard men who may say, I've said this so many times and you didn't hear me. So there's a cry for understanding, but my passion for you to hear me, my passion for you to listen, my passion for you to get me. I think it's all wrapped up in the actual language and the tone of what's being said in that moment. And for every lady being able to decipher that and say, he's not shooting darts at me, he's hurting. This
Oh,
is this is
oh,
this is bothering him. This is a soft sore spot for him. But I think it's in the language and it's in the tone, that anger. Listen to what he says when you interpret that he's angry. Is it a moment where he's saying you always? Is it a moment where he's saying I'm tired of this? Because what you will hear when you're listening to a man in anger or in passion, you'll hear a pattern. You're going
uh-huh.
to always hear a pattern. And that pattern is going to reveal where they're coming from because they're interpreting as they're talking. They're interpreting
Certainly.
as they're talking, as I'm talking, as I'm angry, as I'm expressing, as I'm passionate. I'm interpreting what I'm feeling. So I'm shooting my best shot at what I'm feeling. That's why women have to be listening and not jabbing back and not so fast to speak. Because watch this, my anger or my passion, my tone, my language, or my words is telling you something. It's I'm giving you an answer in my anger, in my language.
Yeah.
It's telling you I'm hurting. It's telling you I need you. It's telling you I'm tired. It's telling you what bothered me. That's why I say always interpreting what experience triggered either the nastiness, the silence, or the loudness, or the jab. And what was his language towards you that you interpreted? Because I may have been backing you up off of me silently or loudly or sharply. So I think we have to pay attention to the language. I think that is the main thing. Is it argumentative? Is it defensive? Is it covering you? Watch this. Am I jabbing you in my anger? That's when you can tell he's upset. That I'm getting you back. I'm proving you're not right again.
Oh,
I'm proving you don't know it all. All these are signals. I'm proving you're not so smart. I'm proving to you, don't compare me. So paying attention to that language, then you'll know how to de-escalate. At the same time, for an example, a man may say, I just want you to hear me. That's passion. You always say. That's a difference from you always say. But you always say. That means I'm telling you, babe, I really want you to hear me. This gets to me. So I think listening to the tone and the language will tell you if he's angry or if he's just hurting. Is he angry? Is he hurting? Is he getting you up off of him? Is he backing you up off of him? Is he jabbing you back? Or is he saying, watch this, I'm so full on the inside, I have nowhere else to go but to erupt like this. And I really want somebody to hear me.
Wow.
See, Lady White, you always open up so much.
Listen, I asked you to make it plain with it. You you made that quite plain. So when we go back to, and we talk about, you said he's interpreting while talking.
Yeah,
That's powerful
yeah, yeah,
because even in that interpreting while talking, it sounds like a myriad of things could be happening.
yes,
And so it could be simultaneously, and you correct me if I'm wrong, simultaneously, it could be backing you up off of me while at the same time expressing how I'm feeling about this emotionally.
absolutely.
Let's talk about so you opened this up, Pastor Day, because when you said that you're more quiet with it. And
Mhm.
there are men, every man is not so vocal. There are men that may not be vocal when they're upset,
Mhm.
but it does not mean that they're not upset about something.
Yeah,
And a lot of times, men that are more quiet nature, they may not be an easy read
yeah,
because if they're more quiet, it just may be periods where they're quiet. And then there may be periods where they're quiet because something is bothering them.
yeah.
Now, that's a very thin line.
Very.
And here is the other thing. If you agitate and continue to push, if they're saying there's nothing wrong. But if you feel like, perhaps there is something wrong and you continue to push, or if there really is nothing wrong and you agitate that spot, how do you with someone that is quiet nature, is it possible to determine that thin line where it's um I'm not saying anything, but I am upset
Yeah,
about something.
yeah, yeah. I think it is. I think two things to consider. The first I would say is behavior don't lie. Language can lie, but behavior don't lie. And this is to the lady at his life to be observant um, with his behavior. So, for example, I would get quiet and just watch TV for hours, and my spouse be like, and again, I'm remarried, so my spouse be like, so "What's wrong with you? Nothing." And I'd be watching TV, and my behavior, I'm shaking my leg. What? This is another tip too. What's his facial expression saying? His demeanor, has it changed? Has it shifted? Is it isolated? Is it focused in the moment? What but his behavior? I would say learning what's his behavior. Behavior don't lie. Pay attention to the pattern of his behavior. The other piece, the flip side of that, what you said is it's a double-edged sword. It's a coin on that because he may just be a silent man. Watch this, who never learned how to express.
Mm.
So he may be okay, but he could keep in mind we're talking about how men are always interpreting. So some men, this is what I've learned. They've learned how. You ever heard a man say, "Just leave me alone. I figure it out. I don't need you to fix it. I don't need you to fix it. I'm gonna figure it out." So you have that side of the coin.
Right.
But this is where the skill of the woman is to determine where her man is. Being, I think that the skill of being able to bring something to his attention is the skill that if every woman could unlock, she could help interpret his behavior to him.
Mm.
Something my wife says to me often,
Mm.
and I'm giving a tip. I be mad, but she be right. I be mad, but she be right. She'll say, "Do you?" She'll say, "This is what she do all the time." She said, "May with loving kindness, can I share something with?" She always do that, loving kindness. So I know something's coming down the pipe. So she's prepping me.
Mhm.
But the way she says with loving kindness always reinforce that she's for me. And
Mhm.
she'll say, "Do you notice you do this? Do you notice your behavior? Do you notice?" And when I reflect on it, because men typically will respond to the right tone proposed in the question before an accusation. Now, if you tell me what I do, though I know I do it, I may back you up off of me. But if you ask me what I do, I may pay attention to what you said and consider it. But I think behavior is key. This is why you have to study who you're with so you know his behavior. What's going on with him? What's going on with him? What behavior? I noticed, for example, let's just take this one situation, just one situation. Let's say you're in a season of your marriage where finances is a challenge. Does he get quiet around the first of the month every month? Because maybe the mortgages do, maybe a few other things that are due, that he feels the weight of that. Do you notice that? Or do you think he's just being, that's behavior?
Ah.
That's
Mhm.
behavior. Paying attention, knowing around that pattern, being able to discern and observe that, so you'll know how to respond and how to react and how to set up the environment. Because that may be a conversation down the road. Hey, love, is this something we could do differently? Because do you notice? I notice around the first of the month, you seem to disengage with me, or or whatever the case may be. I notice whenever I go out with my friends, with this particular friend, you get quiet, but you never say anything. You never
Oh,
you
that's
but you get quiet. These behaviors that reveal, watch this, he's thinking though he's not talking. And we're speaking for a silent man. He's thinking about something though he's not talking about it.
mm.
Because a silent man's tendency, and I'm speaking from experience, is we'll have a million conversations with ourselves.
Mhm. Mhm.
But we're looking for somebody to let into that conversation if they know how to open me up properly.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's good. So I want to transition a little bit and touch on emotional stability.
Mm,
About emotional stability. Let's talk about depression.
yeah.
Because so many times it's believed that only a woman is emotionally unstable. because everything is tied to our emotions. And most of the time, we may be over the top with something.
Hmm.
So we may not always be a hard read,
Yeah.
because some type of way where we're expressing some type of emotion,
Yeah.
whether that's it's on our face, it's in our attitude, it's in our what was do's are now don'ts. It's in the knots that we're doing. Most of the time, women are. It's more understood that I'm upset, even
Hmm.
if we're silent. It's probably easier to read us that
Hmm.
there's a problem, because there's a difference when you say nothing versus we're gonna put a little bit nothing, the difference in. So that tells you that there is a problem. So when we look at emotional instability
Hmm.
for men, when we look at depression, um, those are difficult topics to talk about. We look at rejection, you
Hmm.
know, um, but those behaviors, as you stated, are being portrayed some type of way. Um, and I want to know with men, do you feel like with those instabilities, just say depression, is it something that men work harder at, maybe trying to hide, or is it something that men tend to just consistently deny? And
Hmm.
for men, is depression a stigma that they don't, want on them? Does it signify a lack thereof, or maybe I'm not so much of a man? Talk about those instabilities.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all three in their own way. And reason being because yes, depression does have a negative stigma to it from this angle, the hiding and the denying. I think sometimes the denying may be more of ignorance, that I'm not even aware that I'm depressed. That yes, I had a moment where I was down. What's your man's bounce back time? What's his turnaround time? What's his pattern? Did he have a hard moment, hard day, hard morning, hard afternoon, hard evening? Did some things occur that kind of took his rhythm out of place? And he had a tough evening, but he's back to himself, whatever himself is, the
Mhm.
next day. Or have you noticed this has been 2 or 3 days? He's been extremely quiet. He's been extremely disengaged. His demeanor. He's not been himself for a couple of days. So I think and I'm about to share something. I'll be done. I think um, it's all three that we do learn how to hide based upon how we were influenced.
Mhm.
I think the ignorance of not aware that I may be depressed. Um, and then the stigma, because let me tie all three together.
Mhm.
I am going to dodge anything that snatches the part of me that reduces me from being a hero.
Mhm. Yes, we talked about those heroes. Okay.
Yeah. Anything that makes me look weak, feel less than, feel vulnerable, I'm probably going to hide that to the best of my ability because I never wanted to appear that I don't have strength. I
Mhm.
never wanted to appear that I can't rescue you.
Mhm.
I never wanted to appear that I don't have it together. And that's and keep in mind all of this is processing very quickly.
Mhm.
Depending upon and man, this stuff is so deep. When I say deep, not like deep, I mean deep in terms of how far it travels back through how we were raised or how we were not raised, how we were taught. If we were taught men don't cry, if we were taught suck it up, pull it together, If we were taught you can handle this, if you were taught men make it happen, whatever you were taught in terms of being a man, that stuck with you, that becomes a emotional defense or emotional fuel for how I deal with difficulty. And then what happens is, because men are holistic, and I'm picturing a human being in slices, we know how to function dysfunctionally.
Mm.
So because I'm going to lean to what speaks to me. So I may be depressed over here or hiding something over here, but I can get up and go to work every day. It doesn't affect me to the degree where I call off work and affect our money, because that's speaking to my worth. That's not taking anything of my value away from me. But the stigma of depression, that I'm broken. Now, all of this is, I think, in touch with a man who may have insecurities about these issues. Because strong men, it takes double strength to communicate that I am weak and to be in touch with I do have weaknesses.
Mm.
That's it takes strength, double strength, to know that I can be weak, and then I'm aware, and that doesn't rob me of my values. All of this, I think, depends upon where a man is in his journey of maturing and understanding that we are broken, that we don't have it all together. Watch this. And that's okay. That I'm not less than because of something that's happening. Now, we hear all this stuff, but to practice this is another challenge. But yes, we hide, we deny, and it has a negative stigma.
So let me see how to pull some of this apart, Pastor Dave, because that was loaded. So one of the questions that I want to ask, on behalf of women,
Okay.
um, I've heard it over the years, so how far do you go?
Mhm.
Most women want to know, because sometimes, with men, that may have, some concerning things going on with them. You have women that always, well, how far, do you go with that? Um, what's the stopping point? Where do you draw the line? Those types of things, because because of that, the strength of a man,
Mhm.
sometimes it's so, um a man can, maybe they're not meaning to be degrading.
Mhm.
However, women can sometimes perceive anger as degrading them, talking down to them. If a man hollers at a woman, it's perceived, a different type of way. And so
Mhm.
now it affects that woman's emotional state.
Yeah.
And so there, and again, is a fine line of knowing, how far do you go with this? Do I stop at the point where now I feel like I'm feeling some type of way, meaning that my self-esteem is now low. I don't
Mhm.
feel good about myself. Everything I say, da, da. How do you, where do women, um, where's that line? How do women move forward? Because we've talked a lot about, like, men cry differently.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then on the other side of that, there's a receiver of,
Mhm.
what's going
Mhm.
on. And not saying that it's always the man, because
Mhm.
sometimes I found out, um, the insecurities of a woman will
Mhm.
drive a man crazy.
Yeah.
And so her insecurities will then always create situations
Mm,
and cause her to see things differently, which then in turn frustrates the man.
yeah,
And so it may not always be him. It could in turn be her insecurities, how she was also raised, who was in her life, who impacted her life,
yeah,
what did she see? And so now there's just this big, as we're trying to pull apart the pieces to Men Cry Differently, and then trying to help our viewers, both men and women,
yeah,
understand how all of this working, and how do we put these pieces together and then understand when from either side that maybe abuse is happening, or these are wounds that are much deeper, that need to be dealt with on a deeper level.
yeah.
I'm going to put this ball in your court, Pastor Dave, and
Yeah,
let you
it's
speak
funny.
on this.
You just said the word I wrote down when you first started talking. I'm not one who advocates to accept abuse. So let me say that first of all.
Mhm.
When you say how far do we go, don't accept abuse. I love the balance you pitched it from the perspective of, is my insecurities creating narratives that are not real, or just through my perception. I think that's a consideration. But I think to answer in simplicity, from a summary perspective, how valuable is the relationship? When you say how far do we go, value is the relationship. I think determines getting qualified help, outside help. And this is
Yes.
where this goes back to, I was sharing with one of our leaders that I would love to do from a pastoral perspective. We often do premarital counseling,
Right.
but I think we need to do postmarital counseling,
Yes.
because you're always working on your relationship. And as you are just sharing and tapping into things, it's so much go into maintaining healthy relationships, building
Absolutely.
building healthy relationships,
Yes.
and maintaining. And it's so many things that's a part of this. But number one, I would say, don't accept abuse. Things that are projected, and now you get it's, and it's thin line. It's
Then.
projected to you, but not at you. You got that thin line. That
Mhm.
what I said in anger. This is a whole nother spin. Be angry, but sin not. Is it okay to be angry? Can,
Mhm.
what's that? What works for you? And I'm going off and coming back very quickly, because I know couples who love to fuss. They just, it's like, y'all, that's y'all love language. Y'all fuss, and that's how y'all work through. I'm serious. I know couples like that. It's like, y'all crazy. In your mind, as you be saying, y'all crazy. That works for them. As unhealthy as I may perceive that works for them. But I think number one for ladies, never take abuse, never take anyone degrading you, disrespecting you, or using anything that occurred to mistreat you, because we all have to be accountable and take responsibility for the bigger outcome. No one can make you do anything. Now, environments and situations may frustrate me and push me in a certain direction, but no one can make a man or a woman act in a certain way. We still had to make that conscious choice. So I think there has to be early conversation, early dialogue about where we are. And this is what I'll say as well: be very careful about having high tolerance, because high tolerance often creates another level of normalcy.
Ooh.
Yeah, if you've accepted something for 2 years and then you snap off and want me to change, but if I've been acting like this for 24 months, so dipping things very early, bringing things to awareness very early, not afraid to say, hey, you can be upset with me, you can be angry with me, but you're not going to speak down to me. You're
Oh,
not going to treat me lower than your partner. I'm still your partner.
Oh,
I'm still for you. We're still one. We're still loving one another. We still have to be respectful. We still have to be kind. Now you can be upset, you can be frustrated, watching that tone, but you can't talk to me like that. So be not afraid to say that respectfully. And most men will hear that conversation wise. Now, hey, however you say, now don't argue back at them because I've often heard, I can't argue by myself. If I'm yelling at you and you monotone, pretty soon you're going to de-escalate my tone. But the ability to say, hey, now you can be upset, you can be frustrated. Maybe we need to talk later because I notice you're using words now that you're speaking at me, not just to me. And I don't like how I feel when you share that. You just disrespect me. So maybe we need to talk a little bit later. It's ways you can disengage in the present conversation to be able to come back and not being afraid to address that. Hey, you weren't yourself. Now, we've gotten into debates and disagreements before, but you went to a new place on this when you said dot, 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 because behavior don't lie. So you can call out the behavior, you can call out the word, and you can call out the language. So I would say number one, no abuse, no abuse. Now let's go to the flip side a little bit. The
right.
insecurities. I think
Mhm.
it's all about emotional intelligence and awareness. Am I aware that my insecurities have created this situation? And every time I see him pick up his phone, I'm wondering, is he texting another woman? I'm wondering, is he DMing? Every time he grab his phone, I'm just wondering, where did that come from? Did you
Absolutely.
happen to ask him, hey, who you texting? Did you give him his space to did you show him you trust him? Are you on him with everything? Are you too clingy? What's going on that's sending certain signals that I may have a unhealthy situation?
Mhm.
So I think we have to be aware of what does insecurity look like per woman, because now you got a mixture of insecurities, a mixture of unhealthiness, dysfunction, hiding, and all this stuff is mixed together and comes out through experiences, comes out through moments in the relationship. So I think we have to be constantly working on making the relationship better. Let me say this and I'm done. With the understanding that there is no arrival place, but there is a sustaining place. If I had a great Monday, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm gonna have a great Tuesday.
Right.
But if I'm conscious that I'm going to work on Tuesday, that Tuesday will look somewhat great like Monday with my spouse. Now we can intentionally work on Tuesday and intentionally work on Wednesday. And hopefully by the end of the 7-day week, we may have had a phenomenal week, but it's with levels of intentionality because we never arrive, even in our maturation, even in our getting to know, because we're constantly evolving and we're constantly going through different things that affect us in different ways.
That's good. So when we look at, you said something and it made me think about when we look at stigmas.
Mm.
And I think that sometimes it's easier to be a little bit more harsh. So let's take for instance when you said that maybe when he picks up the phone, it's automatically assumed that okay, is he talking to another woman? Is he talking? And sometimes we're doing the very same things. We're picking up our phones, and to me, it ties back to it could tie back to an insecurity if you've never had instances of him cheating.
That's
So
good.
now there's that, why can't, it's the same thing. We're picking up a phone. So why is it when he pick up the phone, it's perceived differently than when we pick up the phone? And I believe that sometimes we have stigmas that are already on the man,
Mm.
even if we've seen it in another person's relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to be very careful that we don't funnel
Ooh.
things that are going on in other people relationships through our relationship,
Yeah.
because that's so easy when you're receiving, different information from different people. If we're not careful,
Mm.
then we'll start having those, we'll start looking for things. And before, that's why I believe that you have to be mature to even be in relationship with people.
Oh
Because
God.
when you're not mature and you're in relationship with people, even friendships, you don't realize how much that relationship, whatever it is feeding into your relationship if
Mm.
you're not mature.
Yeah.
So subconsciously, we may not think that we're doing it. But if we're constantly hearing about somebody else's spouse picking up the phone and I caught them cheating, and you may not have any of that going on in your house, but hearing it enough, if you're not able to separate that, and I'm talking about these stigmas that are already there.
Mm.
There are certain things that we already expect men to do. It's a stick.
Mm. That's good.
I mean, it may be unspoken. We may say, I'm giving them a chance to do it, to say, but in reality, we've always heard as women, men are dogs. Men ain't no good. You know, we talked a little bit ago about how men, they hear maybe their grandfathers, different people saying, oh, you got to get so many women, this, that, and the third. But there are also stigmas that we've heard as women that affects our
Mm.
relationship, and we don't understand that these stigmas are feeding into how we're functioning in our own relationships. And so I'm saying all of that to say this: it's a lot to cipher through, because we live just day to day. We don't really think about, we think more of the surface of what's going on. We look at the branches rather than what has taken root. And
Mm.
sometimes that root deals with us too, of how we were raised as women, what we heard as women, how we were taught to do as women, and then also things that we've identified with. So if we identified with somebody getting abused in the family, or in that's dear to us, our mothers, aunts, whoever it may, if we have witnessed that, then we're going to do one of two things. We're going to embrace that and see that as a um, being normal,
Mm.
or we're going to be totally opposite with the thought that ain't nobody gonna
Mm.
ever do me or treat me
Mm.
like that. So I'm simply saying that as women, as we try to work through and to understand how
Mm.
men cry differently, we have to also understand where we are as a woman and what we have, going on as well. And that's a lot. That's a lot, when you're bringing together two people. And our focus is a lot of times trying to understand the other without understanding who we are. So,
Mm.
just as much as we need to understand who we're with, even the more we need to understand who we are, to
Mm.
know that, okay, if I'm bringing insecurities to the table, I'm not going to fully understand the cry of a man, because that's
Mm.
going to be intertwined with my own insecurities.
This
and
is so
it's
good.
going to um, limit what I feel like a man should, what his cry should look like.
You said so much, Lady White. And you're so right. Let me say this: relationships are not easy. You said so much. It's for the mature.
Got it. Yes,
They're not easy, though they're beautiful.
yes.
Their work and they're built and they're rebuilt. I think we have to always be aware that we're dealing with known history and unknown history. That when you think about it from this perspective, if your spouse, male and female that are listening, if your spouse asks you, "Hey, love, tell me what are you working on about you that offends you?"
Mm,
Yeah. Are we that self-aware that I'm working on this and I'm working on this? Because now you're dealing with my known history and my unknown history, but yet we're merging two lives into one. Or we're trying to make sure that these two histories that we know of, or they don't come out until my depression creeps in, or my denying creeps in, or it doesn't come out or sticks his head up until my insecurity raises his head. But it comes out the closer I get to people, it comes out in my daily activity.
that's
So I don't know if we give ourselves enough time to get to know ourselves
true.
before we enter into another person in our space. And now the reality is now we're married and we're forced to have to find ourselves while finding you and discovering, and that makes it even harder. A gentleman said in our men's session this morning, I thought it was a powerful statement. He says he learned that he had to stop giving himself so much grace
Mm,
because the grace he was giving himself gave him excuses not to develop himself.
mm, mm.
Just this morning, his brother said that. And I said, God, that is good. He said, God already graces us. He said, but I found out it was easier to give myself grace. And it kept me starting and stopping. It kept me starting and stopping.
Wow.
And so I think how we move into beyond these stigmas and being able to at least pull them to the table and see how they're affecting you. You said something, Lady White, about what's in the subconscious mind. Because typically what's in the subconscious mind comes out when pressure hit. It pulls out what's always been there all along. You just didn't see it because it's been hid for a while
Yes.
until the right experience triggers. Because how much healing do we get? Because it's hard work to work on you. It's a full-time job working on me. But if I know that I'm working on me, I can convey to you what I'm working on so that when you see me working on me, you can grant me a dimension of grace because you know that I'm working on my tone.
Mhm.
I'm working on how I handle you. Let me tell you what heals relationships, and I throw it back to you later. Way it allows us to be able to communicate and catch themselves in a moment. That instead of deflecting, that I responded like this. I did something or I said something, then I take accountability that I recognized it. Oh my God, that sets the relationship up for forward progress. When I can say, "Oh my God, man, I went off on you like that," and that's what I'm working on. That's what I said. The fact that you acknowledge and that you aware, it puts us in a whole nother direction of the relationship because you pull out of darkness what would love to hide and you put it in light to say, I'm addressing you, I'm dealing with you, I'm working on you, and I'm acknowledging how this affects us.
Oh, that's good. That's good, Pastor Dave. Ooh, this is loaded. This is loaded, and we can easily go in so many different directions with this. But one thing you said that I totally agree with is it's work. It's relationships or work. It's even work because Let's go back to the men cry differently. If we as women, in one of the on one of the broadcasts, you talked about men having a safe space.
Mm,
That's powerful.
mm,
If a man does not have a safe space with the woman he's with, because when we're looking at men cry differently, we're looking at, the different things, whether it's depression, anger, rejection he's dealing with, abandonment that he's dealing with, just a lack of accountability, those very immaturity, having been with mom maybe
mm,
too long, what they call the mama's boy, syndrome. But all of those different things, if we're going to, as women, if it is our desire to create a safe space, but just say, for instance, somehow that is not working out,
mhm.
what would you recommend as a safe space for a man? Because keeping it in, not saying anything, um, handling it in ways that are offensive, of course, is not the answer.
Yeah,
So if that person, that spouse, that significant other is not a safe space, what would you say it would be a safe space for a man?
yeah, yeah. I would say even to the ladies, something I thought about when you were talking with that creating a safe space. Ladies, be careful about owning him.
Ooh,
Yeah, though you're helping him, though you are attempting to create a safe environment to talk, to dialogue, to heal, don't feel like you have to own his behavior, own the abandonment, own the outcomes of rejection, own all that comes along with him being him. You're there to assist, to walk with, and provide the environment of accountability. So if you're not that safe place, now it goes to dismantling pride. What is a safe space? See, now you tap into the bigger picture. The bigger picture may be healing. The bigger picture may be the benefits of our family as we get better, as we improve. So, what are the options of safe places that you may be able to suggest, but hold him accountable to be a part of? I hear some women that they do that, and we suggest that often. But don't feel like you got to fix it. Don't feel like you got to own it.
that's
You're
good.
just attempting to create that avenue that things can start coming out and not residing and not hiding, and then you go from there. Now, especially for our people, when I say our people, because of the stigma of even therapy, the stigma of even getting outside help. Sometime we would talk. I'm sure you may have heard it before too, Lady White, and those that are listening. What go on in this house, stay in this house.
That's right.
And so we were trained to hold on to stuff for as long as we could, or we were trained to go to the grave with it. But I think the power of agreement. See, sometimes the safe space is what can we agree to get better? That we may not be able to have certain conversations. This is what goes back to owning everything. For example, you all may have tier one conversations, tier two conversation, but it may be some stuff that there's a trusted brother, a trusted mentor that you can point them to. It may be a trusted counselor that you can point them to. But you may be the safe space for tier one stuff, for tier two stuff. But some really deep stuff you may have to direct. Watch this, and then you receive the benefit that he's better when he's home. He's better when he's with the kid. He's better as a man, not just a husband, not just a father, but he's better as a man because you helped him to be a better him, not just a better performer.
That's good.
Yeah,
Good.
and being able to communicate that I'm here just trying to help set the environment to be a part of growth and healing, because I want you to be a better you, not just a better performer. Because we can perform well. We know how to be daddy. We know how to be the husband. We know how to do all these things, but it doesn't always mean that we're getting better on the inside. So don't own everything. That may not be your skill set. That may not be who you are and where you are in the journey of wholeness,
Good.
maturation. Watch this, addressing you. You may not have the tools at this moment to answer everything, but you may be the one that can get the conversation and the environment initiated, that there is a need we do need to address that can benefit all. So I would say start at what the benefits are of addressing, and then being able to find out what are those safe spaces for him, and being able to trust. This is something I think I shared before in one of the sessions that may help. Or as early as possible, determine your boundaries. That way, you'll always maintain respect. You all may have trusted people that you say, hey, if something gets too deep, because we're always practicing accountability in the relationship, not hideability. Accountability, not hideability. So if stuff get too rough, this is who we go to. If we go past this point, if the relationship spills over to this place, these, and see, that's tough. Even now, if you can feel that on the inside, now I ain't feeling nobody in my business, and I ain't telling my secrets, well, you may not get the help you need, because in a minute, your outcome is going to tell everybody that you had something going on that you didn't deal with. In a minute.
Yes.
In a minute, the outcome gonna say, y'all been having some issues. This tree been leaning a long time, and it finally hit the ground. And this is a test for all of us. And we got to constantly be aware, okay, where are we? And learning, okay, this person may be able to help them better than I, but I'm going to receive the benefit from them being better.
Oh, wow. 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 You said something so powerful. And well, one feeds into the other. You said that maybe we can help, maybe we are tier one or tier two in what we can assist with.
Hmm.
And then it may be that I think that we have to embrace the fact that maybe we cannot help at all.
Wow.
And maybe our help is prayer
Hmm.
while he's getting the help that
Yeah.
he needs. And I think that for women, it is so hard for us to not help, in the sense that we feel like we have to be talking or doing. And so it's difficult for us to not help. But I think it's very important that we realize that if we're not equipped to help from the perspective of being able to create that safe space, then we're going to have to pray anyway.
Yeah.
So prayer then should be our focal point,
Hmm.
not ever feeling like that we're not contributing or helping,
Hmm.
because prayer is a great help. You know, they say it can do what we cannot do. And I
Yeah.
think as women, our biggest thing, because we're helpers by nature, we have to understand when our help is hurting, when our
Hmm.
help is not helping,
Hmm.
you know, when our help is creating uh, additional barriers, when our help is actually delaying a process that could be started, but because we're helping, we're delaying that process. And so we shouldn't look down on ourselves if we're not able to help
Hmm.
to the level that a man needs that help.
Hmm.
And so when we do try to help, we tend to create a frustrated atmosphere.
Mm.
So now we're in this atmosphere that's frustrated, it's tense. And I'm not just talking about for the moment, I'm talking about for moments.
Mm.
Even when we have like a good little giddy conversation, we
Mhm.
notice that it's still tense. It's not where if we're not equipped to help, it does not mean that there is a lack in us. Some things are beyond us, and some things that we may not have the full understanding. The other thing is in him getting help, then you're being helped.
Yeah. Yeah.
In him getting help, that means that you're being helped, your marriage is being helped, the children are being helped. And so if we can't, again, if we can't help, it's not a reflection on you.
Mm.
I believe that a wise woman understands when to step back.
Mm.
If you can't create a safe space, meaning if you can't get yourself under control, because we're not going to be able to create safe spaces, and we're just as demanding, we're in this mama role. It's one of the worst roles that we can, try and function in is spouse or significant other, but really the undertone is from a motherly telling you what to do perspective. And
Mm.
so him being helped, it helps us. And I think we have to be okay with that and not look at ourselves as less than.
Yeah.
And then we cannot judge our relationship by somebody else's relationship.
Yeah.
We cannot. Just because another woman is seasoned in doing a certain thing, there's no reflection on you.
Mm.
The best thing that we can do, I always say that if you're in a relationship and you're struggling, and this is to the women now, we get it with the men and that, but to the women, and you're struggling, the very best thing you can do is you get somebody that can help you.
Mm.
And if you get somebody that can help you, because sometimes that help is, listen, honey, you're gonna have to hush your mouth. You're going to have to not run up on that man about that every time you see this. You're going to have to pray more. You're going to have to, if we don't have people in our lives that can help us, sometimes we can't help like we think that we can help. And so that creates, additional issues. But Pastor Dave, so what I want you to do, this is our third round of Men Cry Differently. What I want you to do, I want you to paint a
Mm.
very good picture for us. And you can do it however you need to do it with various examples, however you need to do this. But paint a picture for us of this whole idea of men cry differently so that we're aware of it in the fullness. We've been
Mm.
talking about different pieces. Bring this together for us. How is it that men cry differently, and how do we respond to the cries of a man, even if he never says he's crying?
Wow. Wow. Great question. I'm painting the picture as best as I can since you
Good.
dropped the question. Never forget, though you're dealing with a performer, you're dealing with a human. The grace that I'm dealing with a person who is changing, who is growing, who is learning themselves as well.
Mm,
That every man is not looking for you to fix everything, though he may be looking to share and convey where he is. Um, I think learning that it's not all personal, that he's complex to himself at times. Keeping in mind, ladies, we live in a world that forces a man to perform. So there are very few places that he's not performing.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so sometimes a man is crying for freedom. He's crying for outlets of the pressure. He's crying for a moment where he can just be a human, not be the father, not be the supervisor,
Mhm.
not be the teacher, not be the VP, whatever role he plays in life. So I think learning, number one, it's not always personal. I think if a woman could learn that, because if you personalize it, you will think it's jabbing at your worth when it's not. Don't confuse how he feel with your worth.
Oh, that's good.
Don't confuse how he's feeling with your worth. Um, the last thing I would say is the question. I think Lady White said a lot in terms of having that person that may be able to say to you, baby, hush, hush, relax on that. One of the things that I've learned through my own relationships, marriage, my history, and what I've had the privilege to looking into other relationships, what I have seen work that seems to be universal is the skill to learn what to address and not to address.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You said something about prayer, about learning how to address things in prayer because it's not personal. We're working through ourselves as well. We're working through what we got, what we didn't get. We're working through mama issues. We're working through daddy issues. We're working through the dysfunction. We're working through the bad advice. We're working through all this as well. And we're working through it while life is happening. I think that's the biggest thing. We can't pause life and work on us. We have to keep performing
Mm.
while we're trying to get better, while we're working on our wholeness. So I think the grace for that. Lastly, I'll say the greatest question you could probably ask a man that is crying out is, what do you need from me? Tell me what you need because I want to respond to you. Tell me what you need and allow him to tell you what he wants to tell you. If you set up the environment that I'm not a fixer, that I'm your friend, I'm for you, I'm your ride or die, I just need to know, what do you need from me? Do you need me to be a cheerleader? Do you need me to coach? Do you need me to have your back? I just want to be able to meet the need that you need me to meet for you. I think that may open up a whole dialogue and conversation.
Absolutely.
And then the last thing I would say is look forward to growing together. If you set the relationship up to grow and to change and evolve, that today is a new day, that we're working towards our goals, but we're celebrating one another because we do cry differently. We quit. However life has affected us, we pout sometimes. We're disengaged at times. We're frustrated at times. But if I know in the back of my mind that no matter what's going on, and I'm speaking in a healthy situation, not abusive, that wherever I am and what I'm going through, you got my back. I'm telling you, that image of security goes far with a man, and he knows you're a safe place. So, just a few things.
Wow. Those are all good things. So when we're looking at men crying and men crying differently, Can you point out specifics of like the cry, that actual cry? What does that look like? And even if we've repeated it,
Hmm.
repeat it again. So
Hmm.
the cries of a man may come out anger,
Yeah.
resentment. Talk
Yeah.
about that.
Rejection, silence, overreaction, uh,
Mhm.
isolation, wanting to abandon responsibilities at time. All these things are cry. I'm short a lot. I'm short. You see, I'm at paying attention. I think we talked about earlier, learning his behavior, learning when he's different. Is he normally engaged, but he's disengaged? Is he silent? Is he loud? Is he pouting? Is he throwing a tantrum? Whatever that may be, these are ways that we cry. But keep in mind, we were sharing earlier, a man is always interpreting as well. So sometimes he's trying to fix it in his own mind. But I think all these behaviors, pay attention. Remember, we said earlier, behavior don't lie. Pay attention to behavior because this is real key. This is a nugget just hit me. Sometimes he will say something that's challenging, but still behave properly. So you hear sometimes love is what it does, not just what it says.
Mhm.
So pay attention. Sometimes that tell you where he is and how he's crying out, that he's bothered, he's challenged with some things, and learning what's going on with him, being in tune with your man, what's going on in his world. To let me see if he's off balance, to see if there's something else going on with him. What was the day like? What were the words like? What was his morning like? What kind of conversations did you have? Did you not have? All these things are ways that we cry. Sometimes we sit in front of the television, we cry. Sometimes it's a football game, basketball game, heals us. Sometimes it's hanging out with the friends.
Oh,
These
gosh.
are different ways that we are crying for freedom and for peace. The last thing I would say is keep in mind that I think a whole man, Russ is staying in the yard all day. Yeah. But, but watch this. Watch what he said. I like that, staying in the yard all day, because very seldom is a man not somewhere thinking,
It's good.
because we're wired that way. We're thinking, we're processing. So giving him space to process
Like that.
and know that he's not projecting his processing that something's wrong with you. He's not projecting his processing is something wrong with you. And a man's yard may be his car. A man's yard may be his favorite store. It may be anything, but not personalizing all these different behaviors. I think they're just indicators for good conversation.
Oh, that's good. So I know for my husband, his yard is fishing. Yeah. He loves to fish, and I feel like that we have to embrace and be okay with what it is that a man does that helps him to decompress,
Yes.
that helps him to, because I know we as women sometimes feel like we're doing the most of it. We're doing the washing, the keeping up with the house, the taking care of the children, the doing this and doing all of those different things. But it's important that we don't forget the weight that's on the man as well. Just because he's not doing task does
Mm.
not mean that there's not a weight, that he's not bearing that responsibility. Um, and then we do have to consider when you talked about Pastor Dave, knowing what happened in his day. Typically, Now, my husband, he may come and talk about, some of the different things that happen, during the day. But I like to know the deeper things. So I dive a little bit deeper because I want to know, okay, well, that's very interesting. So how did you handle that?
Mm.
To remove the stigma that he doesn't need to come home and decompress.
Mm. Mm.
Just because I come in the door and I'm talking about, today such and such, and I'm already detailed anyway, so being able to pull out of him, okay, so how did you handle that?
Mhm.
And he'll just talk and talk about how he handled, certain things and, situations. And I think we have to be mindful of opportunities, having the wisdom to
Mm.
help him decompress, even if it's not dealing with the issue that we feel like he has.
Woo. That's great.
Because even though it's not decompressing over here, we're letting the air out of something, which is still relieving tension. I think we have to be okay with not always jumping to what we think is, well, this is the problem. This is
Mm.
what we need to talk about. Sometimes we have to work to create those safe spaces.
Mm.
And then when we create those safe spaces, what you said, Pastor Dave, is that we don't have to own it. And too many times we're owning and we're making it be our problem, I'm the reason that
Mm.
this is happening. It can be so personal to us and perhaps not to him at
Mm.
all. And so you talked about men being, thinkers, and I think again it's important for us to realize if a man is a man, there is a level, there's a weight on him. And the thing that I found out is just because he's not talking about it does not mean that he's not considering it.
That's right.
Sometimes, men are talking, they're thinking about, I want this for my family. I want that for my family. We cannot be looking over the fence, putting pressure on him because what he may be thinking about for us may be so much greater than
Mm.
what we see. So there, I'm saying all that to say there's a pressure and we have to understand the cry.
Mm.
Once we understand that cry, having the wisdom to know how to, like the young people say, how we need to move. Once we understand that there is a cry there, and then knowing how not to frustrate the situation,
Mm.
but to help, that situation. Again, how do we decompress in other areas while it may be somebody else that will have to help decompress in this area? One of the things that we as women can pray about is the who, that he finds the person that he needs. And
Wow.
that's a powerful prayer.
Yeah.
That we find that however, whatever needs to happen, but that he will find, I'm going to create as much of a safe space as I can, but then I'm willing to turn him over to whoever can help
Mm.
deal with that cry. It may not be me. I may be tier one. He may be crying level 3. And so praying that he will find who it is
Mm.
that can help him. Ladies, it may not be your pastor. It may not be your daddy.
Woo.
It may not be your brother. It may be somebody else that is equipped to help him, maybe therapy. But we need to know and be okay with whoever it is that's going to help him to get to where he needs to be. So we've had a lot of conversation, a lot more conversation of men crying, and you know, um, men cry differently, but they do cry. May
Mm.
not always be tears, but it does not mean that there's not a cry coming from that man.
Mm.
I want to encourage you, please, ma'am, please, sirs, if you have not watched part one and part two, you need those nuggets. You want to put those nuggets in your treasure chest, because I promise you they will help you to understand how men cry and how that cry may be different than that what we're familiar with. So, Pastor Dave, we did have a question
Mm.
came up, and it was a little bit further up, and it says, "What if the man refuses to be held accountable,
Woo.
no matter how hard you try? What if he just absolutely refuses?"
Yeah, I would encourage from that is there a third party intervention? Um, Without knowing the details of every situation, I'm assuming, and again, I'm using the word loosely, I'm assuming that he didn't start off that way. That if he started off somewhat open to accountability, I would have to ask what has occurred, that it because it sounds like he may be holding on to some things that he has not let go yet.
Mhm.
And typically, when a man is offended, there's nothing you can say or do that's right through his perspective, because
Oh,
he's seeing through offense. You can't be good enough. You can't be right enough. And it sounds like it may be some of that going on. So it sounds like there needs to be some type of third party involvement. And in this case, again, like I say, without knowing all the details, I'm just speaking in general, you may have to go with him based upon the goal of, hey, I just think there's some areas I want us to work on. That way you're a part of the challenge, but you're inclusive of the healing as well. But it sounds like there's some unforgiveness and maybe some
mm.
offense if he completely refuses to hold anything accountable, to be accountable on anything. So that's a starting place. So, Lady White, you may have something to add to that.
I do not. I think you covered that well.
Mhm.
You know, I believe you spoke a little bit about those, the hidden things, those things
Mm.
that are hidden. And so that could very well be, as you've stated, what is going on, with that particular situation. Um,
Mhm.
it's key that we understand that just because we're with someone, we're not going to know everything about that person overnight, over a year, over
Mhm.
2 years, because some of the things that we discover are discovered through process.
Mm.
So it could be that, and this comes from both ways. I trust you a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. And so that process may take a few years. And so we'll never know overnight what somebody is dealing with.
Mm.
Each even situations, it can be a situation that occurs, and we may only pick up one thing out of that situation. And nine times out of 10, it's going to be the most pressing thing that we heard at the time.
Mm.
So we may pick up anger out of that situation. Well, he mad. Why is he always mad? but we may not understand that rejection is attached to that, abandonment is attached to that. We may not understand that piece until years down the road. Even
Mm,
if he tells us why I'm responding, why I'm angry in this particular situation, we have to know and understand that 9 times out of 10 is not the fullness.
mm,
Does not mean that he's hiding anything. It just
mm.
means that this is what's being presented at the moment. And so
That's
this
good.
is what I'm dealing with because it's the thing that I feel is causing this problem right now.
Mm,
And so I wanted to put that out there that we can never know a person and what's going on in their life, even if we feel like they was our childhood sweetheart. Oh, I know him and the family, and you probably have an idea,
mm.
but we may not always know the fullness because sometimes you don't know a person until they get with you and something in you brings out something in them,
Yes.
so those things may not even surface until they get with you.
Mm,
That's why it's important to listen to, you can listen to other people saying, oh, well, child, he get with you, he gonna do this, that, and third. I want to tell you, there are certain things in you that will bring out things that may have never been seen in
wow.
another relationship.
That's
Oh.
good.
you want to
That's
you want
good.
to jump on that, Pastor Day?
No, you're so accurate. Because even with you, you're a new person. So he may respond totally different to you than he responded in the past. So don't overlook what you're seeing. Don't lie to yourself. Start with the facts, start with what's going on, and then you work from there. But you hit it. You hit it. Could that be considered a cry, not wanting to be held accountable? Absolutely. Absolutely. Remember, we talked about earlier the the known history and the unknown history, that both of them are merging, and then partnering with what Lady White just said. You may be learning the part of him that's unaccountable. So he may have been accountable over here,
Yeah.
and with you, that may have something that has surfaced because different pressure, different experiences, different space and different time where he is, that may have pulled that to the top, but it's always been there. It just manifested through this current situation. But I think it's a lot uh, deeper when you start dealing with a man who doesn't want to be accountable. Because I'm thinking, is that from a language perspective? Is that from responsibility of the home perspective? There's so many ways to perceive that. Because one thing I'll say, and I'm done, even with a man's man, how you can tell he's progressing and maturing, that he, in the midst of his dysfunction, he typically don't abandon his responsibilities.
Mm.
Typically, that's the one pattern that I've seen with real men. There's a pride he gets from being strength, from being provider, from being guider, from being protector. So I would have to say, okay, what does him not being accountable look like? What does that actually mean, to go deeper? But just a few things. But it can be a cry. It can be his immaturity or his, I think Lady White said it early, if the mama part of him is still very prevalent, the part of him that has been over nurtured, as Bishop Powell says, and underdeveloped, that he may not have the capacity to be accountable. He may not have the ability to the capacity to be accountable through disagreement, to be accountable through pain, to be accountable through. He may not have that capacity, but if you overlooked it and didn't pay attention to it, it could be affecting you today in comparison to something you thought would be different.
It's good.
History, history, modeling. That's my thoughts.
History is why that choice, why they're choosing what to be accountable for.
But I'll add to this too and say this is probably a really good space for clear conversation. See, we a lot of times in relationships, we assume, we don't dialogue. Talk about everything. What's your expectation of him? What's your expectation of her? What do you think? Not what your daddy did, because you might assume he's going to do the same thing that your daddy did. He may not perform that way. It may be the last thing your ex-boyfriend, your ex-girlfriend. Don't assume nothing. Have a conversation about everything. What if he's never heard the word of accountability? What if he's been challenged with accountability? Age could be a factor, all these things. But talk about everything. Find a way to have a conversation with that question. What does that mean to him? In comparison, what does that mean to you? What does that look like to him? What does that look like to you? What is your expectation of accountability versus what is his expectation of being accountable? Because that one came up 2 or 3 times on the bottom of this accountability stuff. Just food for thought.
That is so true. That accountability piece does keep popping up, and I feel that you addressed that very well. It is a difference in, perspectives. Conversation, like you said, is key. Even when we cannot deal with everything at one time.
Yes.
So we as women, we cannot overload. We can't try to deal with the emotional instability by way of you. It is not wise to try and deal with, depression and rejection and abandonment. Those are loaded. That is loaded. Having the wisdom and knowing what to deal with. And even in having a conversation, as Pastor, that is knowing what conversation. Sometimes you have to come from around the mountain, not all in one day. Sometimes you have to come around the mountain with something you want to talk about this, but having the wherewithal to hold your horse, understanding that we already don't have clear communication. So I have to build to where when I'm talking, he's not on the defensive. And so again, you have to come around the mountain. A lot of times we're in relationships and we do not even know what that other person likes. Yet and still, we want to go deal with the hard stuff. Do you know his favorite color? Do you know what sports he like on TV? Are you willing to sit and watch a basketball game? Because sometimes men will invite you into spaces that we may not want to visit. But then we get upset. Okay, well, I'm going out with the boys. Well, I'm gonna go do this. When last week they wanted us to sit and watch the basketball game. If you're serious about your relationship and you want to create a safe space, get on YouTube and figure out what's going on in a basketball game. So when you're sitting and watching a basketball game, you can engage.
Wow.
Engagement will help to create a safe space. I was a cheerleader in high school. My husband was a football player. My kids played basketball. But what I learned is I was a cheerleader, but I didn't know a lot about basketball.
Mm.
I knew about cheering. So whenever I got married, and then my husband was watching basketball and this type of thing, I was familiar with basketball, but I didn't have the knowledge of the game. And sometimes we need the knowledge of the game, not just being familiar with what's going on. So I say that if you want to create a safe space for all of us, he won't talk, he won't do this, he won't find out what he does like to do and come into his world to
Mm.
begin to create the safe space that he needs. If you don't know the game, you can't play the game.
Can't play the game.
If you don't know it, you can't play it. And I'm not talking about playing with emotions, but I'm talking about getting in and creating. Get in the game
Mm.
is what I'm saying. You have to
Wow.
get in the game. And a man knows when you on the sideline versus when we're really in the game. When we're in the game, it says, I care about what you care about. I love what you love. I'm here, I'm with, I may not know a whole lot, but you can find out enough to know, oh, that was a 3-pointer. Oh, they stole the ball then. Oh, he carried the ball. They're on offense, they're on defense. Find out what a couple of the players is. Again, it takes work. It takes work to understand the cry. We've given you as much information as we can give on men crying and how they cry differently. And sometimes, lady, if we want to know that cry,
Mm.
we need to do our homework. And where do we start? We start with those behaviors. Pastor
Mm.
Dave told us. What kind of behaviors are being exhibited? If we want to have a better understanding, sometimes talking may not be the first thing that we need to do. We need to get an understanding of what's going on with our men, what's happening, and not, as Pastor Dave said, let's not take it personal.
Mm.
Let's not get upset because he don't want to talk. Because it could be that he's not saying anything because he's having a bout of feeling like a failure. And how do he say, I feel like a failure, for us to turn around and say, yeah, because this bill wasn't paid on time and car notice due, and but you don't have to feel like a failure. I don't want you to feel like a failure. But at the same time, we're making him feel like he needs to be able to perform.
Wow.
We want more of a performer than we want relationship. If we get relationship, we get performance.
Amen.
If we can create this safe space, everything else will fall right into place. You'll never have to wonder why he's talking to somebody else, why he'll never talk to you. It's because we have not created that safe space for him to do so. And sometimes that safe space, again, is coming into his world. And then the next thing, not making it be about us and our needs
Wow.
and what we need him to be. I've talked to women all through the years, inside the church, outside the church. And I can easily ping it when women start with what they need. Well, he's not doing this and I need. And he's not and I need. If that's all the focus is, then you want a performer. And if that's the case, it's some sugar daddies out there that'll perform. You just have to understand what it is that you want. Because if you want relationship, then sometimes performance comes behind all of that.
Mm.
It comes behind, it's knowing who you're with, it's appreciating who I'm with, it's bringing the best out of you, bring the best out of him, you building him right up. And everything that you think that he's not thinking about, I guarantee he's probably already thinking about it. I found out that men will sometimes be way ahead of us while we're assuming, well, you don't care about me. You don't see this. I stay the course. If you're going to stay the course, but be willing to put the work in. And so I think we've shared a mouthful on these candid conversations. Men cry differently.
Mm.
And you're going to have to figure out what that cry looks like.
Mm.
What do I need to do to create that safe space for him? Pastor Dave, we've talked about it. We brought out some great nuggets. You've shared
Yes.
some great insight, some great wisdom, things that we can build on and to grow on. We have about 4 minutes left. What would you like to say to us? And then would you mind closing us out? Well, you pray, and then
Yeah.
I'll come back and close us.
Sounds good. Yeah. A lasting thought. And it was just everything you said, Lady White, was leading to what I was thinking. If we keep in mind that when you enter relationships, most of us enter relationships to get our needs met, when
Yes.
actually you enter a relationship, a marriage, to meet the other person's need. And we reap what we sow.
Yes.
So if you sow the practice of learning and meeting the need, I believe we will harvest and reap our needs met. But if you go into the relationship to get your needs met versus meeting the need, you're setting the relationship up for sabotage.
Mhm.
I want to encourage you to
Good.
step into that person's world, because the fact that you're in a covenant relationship, you've entered a relationship to meet their needs first, not get yours met. And if both parties have that mentality, we can both get our needs met.
That's good.
Father, I thank you for these last three sessions. Thank you for this platform. Thank you for Lady White and her wisdom. Thank you for every listener, every woman, every man. And I pray for the spirit of wisdom to rest upon them, oh God. I pray, oh God, for newness, freshness, learning, attentive listening, and the ability to apply what we have heard these last three sessions.
Yes.
Father, let it mend, let it build, let it connect in a new and fresh way, that we can have profitable, beneficial outcomes in our relationships, that healing, joy, and laughter will be our portion, and we will model the practice of wholeness and building what we want to see. Thank you for the grace to do the hard work
Yes.
over and over again. In Jesus' name, I say amen and amen.
Well, Pastor Dave, thank you so much for joining us 3 times. This is our third session, but it has been powerful, Men Cry Differently. Again, for those of you that are just joining, I noticed that there were some comments saying, "Hey, this was my first time." If you're a first timer, again, I want to go and encourage you to watch part one and part two. You will be as equally blessed as you've been with part three. And I want to let my audience know that in 2024, we will continue on with our 60-minute segments. Listen, we gave you a big end of the year grand finale with a 2-hour session this time. But coming up in 2024, we will resume with our 60-minute sessions. And ladies, please do not feel like I have forgotten about you, because we're going to start the new year off building you and making sure that you're prepared for you. And so it has been great. This is our last session for 2023. Excited and looking forward to 2024. Before we go, I want to encourage you to please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to Candid Conversations with Chenille. Make sure you tell your family and your friends that we are on and our conversations are loaded. And so that's it. You all have a great holiday season, and I will see you in the new year with more candid conversations. Good night. We love you.